Hi, my name is Nick Shell, and if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you just watched me perform my original song called If the Atheists Are Right. So I figured what would be a good idea is, as the songwriter, I go through the lyrics of that song and explain why I chose the words for this song. I'm filming this on March 30th, 2020. Is it a coincidence that we're in the middle of the coronavirus lockdown? And it is a coincidence that I just happen to be wearing this Metallica shirt with graves on it. It's all a coincidence for that. But it's probably not a coincidence that I wrote this song during all of this. I've always been fascinated by the concept of life after death. And one of the things that keeps it fascinating is that none of us can know for sure. Like if we could prove what happens the moment someone dies to their consciousness, and we can have like a live video feed on YouTube or whatever, then we'd all know. But that doesn't exist. So it's a matter of you have to formulate your view, your perspective of it, and roll with it. That's your thing. Or if you don't have one, then that's still your thing. So that's why I wanted to start with atheists. I obviously recognize that atheists are not an organized group of people. It's definitely not a religion. But in studying the general concept of what atheists, the way they view consciousness after we die, the feedback that I've received. Well, let me just start with the first verse. If the atheists are right about what happens when we die, the screen will fade to black, and that is that. No memories or consciousness will continue to exist. No confirmation whose views were true. That is, if the atheists are right about what will happen when we die. See, I think that's fascinating within itself. For people who are atheists, who believe there is no God or no sort of deity, that it's all some kind of fairy tale, that sort of thing. If that's your perspective, then you're never going to get confirmation that your perspective was true, and nor will anyone else. That's fascinating within itself. So to have a view of something that we can't know about, and to believe it your whole life, and to not ever be able to know for sure that you're right, because if that's the case, we all lose consciousness the moment we die. So that's fascinating, that's the general consensus of what atheists perceive happens to consciousness when we die. That's fascinating, and I chose that as the title of the song, mainly because I think it's an interesting way to open the door to start that conversation, because the other verses are about organized religions. And I didn't want to single one out. So I thought, well, what if we start with something that's a pretty fascinating thought, and that is that if the atheists are right, none of us are going to get confirmation of anything that we believe or perceive to happen after we die. So there you go. And I want to say too, as far as I always like to explain how I think songs will be misinterpreted, and that's assuming people actually hear them. Like, I understand, I'm just a guy in my guitar. I'm a guy in my garage with a guitar. There we go, I said it right the second time. And I recognize that that's all I am. I'm not trying to be a big deal. I'm not trying to be cool. I just consider me an artist, or at least in my mind I am. If 100 people hear my song, a lot of people are gonna understand it, they're gonna get it. But there's always gonna be people who misinterpret what I'm trying to do. And I think the danger in this song is, and I've talked about this on my channel here, about tribalism. I think the world is easily consumed by the concept of hiding behind a label. And what they do is they hide behind the label, I'm this, and I'm gonna look down on anyone else who doesn't share my view. And I'm against tribalism. So I'm an anti-tribalist, if that's what it is. But ultimately, I recognize that the majority of the world does not agree with me on a whole number of things, whatever it is. None of us completely match up to our own views on things. But I refuse to look down on someone just because they have a different view. No matter how much I oppose it, I don't look down on them for that reason. Because I think it really limits you in the human experience to look down on a person because you disagree with them, even if morally. It's still holding you back as an individual. That's what I think. So I think the danger in this song is that people are going to hear it and be stuck behind their label. Well, I'm this religion, or I relate more to this other verse. So therefore, all the other verses, all of those people are stupid. Or it's going to be a case where people say, well, I don't like the way he generalized my belief system or my view or whatever. And I totally recognize that. Imagine the task of generalizing 3 of the most popular religions of the world, in addition to the population that does not believe in God or deity or etc. It's virtually impossible. So it's a matter of knowing that these are simply generalities. It doesn't mean that's what every single person in that group believes. But I think because it's the internet, because it's YouTube, people are going to get caught up behind that and miss the whole point of the song. The whole point of the song is it's fascinating that none of us can know for sure. Because if we could know for sure, and it wasn't faith or it wasn't belief or something like that, then we wouldn't have a reason to believe it because it would be undeniably true. That's fascinating. But I think that point of the song is what's going to be lost on people, certain people, because they're caught up in tribalism. Moving on to the second verse. If the Jews are right about what happens when we die, well, nothing really seems to come to mind. If there's a life beyond the grave, it is not for us to say. All that matters happens in this life. That is if the Jews are right about what happens when we die. What am I thinking of? It's a movie called I Wish I Was Here with Zach Braff, who is Jewish. And it's a movie that he made. And that's when I first learned that as far as people of the Jewish faith, they're really not concerned about life after death. That's not something they really have a streamlined belief system on. They don't really seem to pretend to know or care or even put value in it. Ultimately, it's a matter of what happens in this life is what matters. And I will point out that also, I feel, if I were to have done a verse on agnostics, I would have put it in this group here. I wouldn't have put it with the atheist view. I would have put it on with the Jewish view. I have perceived that agnostics don't really seem to care what happens after this life anyway. It's just about this life and being the best person you can, kind of concept. So I would actually think that there's quite similarity in that general view. Moving on to the third verse, if the Muslims are right about what happens when we die, it's punishment or it's paradise. So try your best to be good enough, more positive than negative, and then just hope it all measures up. That is if the Muslims are right about what happens when we die. What I think is interesting, as I was actually doing some research to get these generalities here, what I feel is, I think that the Muslims and the Christians are the most similar. They're the two religions that both undeniably have two versions of the afterlife, one that's good, one that's bad, based on your faith, based on your life, based on your belief in the deity involved. I see a lot of similarities there. But what I see the difference is, and I'll just go ahead and go into the last verse, if the Christians are right about what happens when we die, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. So love your neighbor as yourself, trust that God will do the rest. You choose the path to heaven or hell. That is if the Christians are right about what happens when we die. So in that verse though, while I see much similarity between Christianity and Islam, I see that with Christianity, it's a concept of right out of the gate, you can't be good enough. You can try as hard as you want to, but you're not going to be good enough to make it into heaven or to find God's grace without trusting in Jesus to begin with. That it's all about grace through Christ. So it's the matter of you're already born into sin. There's no chance of being good enough without believing in Christ. And where we still have this path of, whereas in Islam, it's my understanding is in Islam, it's going to be paradise versus some sort of punishment, or we want to call it Muslim hell, or whatever we want to call it. Whereas with Christians, it's the Christian version of heaven versus hell. But with Christianity, you already know you can't be good enough. So I think that's interesting. I think that, to me, fundamentally are two major differences between Christianity and Islam. And I think, too, if I were to put another group in there with Islam, with Muslims, it would actually, because I didn't notice I don't have a verse for Buddhism or Shintoism, because I think a lot of religions, a lot of faiths ultimately rely on a concept of if you do more good in the world than bad, then you'll end up in the better place. But again, Christianity is not that black or white, because you already know you can't win without grace and in Jesus, believing in Jesus. So that's interesting. Then the last line. So tell me what will happen when we die, when you die. And that's the whole point of the song, because these are major views that people have across the world. But in the end, you decide that. No one decides that for you. It's like a choose your own adventure book. Like I end this song and maybe you're expecting me to give you an obvious answer. Well, there's the information, and it's a matter of just by listening to the song, or at least me describing that song, it puts you in a perspective where you have to think, which one of these do I align with most? At least it makes you think about it. And that's the whole concept. It's fascinating that we can't know the right one in this life. We can't know. We have to either make a decision or be indecisive about it, which ultimately becomes our decision. I've just always been fascinated by this concept. And if you'll notice, a lot of my songs that I write are about death, about afterlife, about dealing with the fact that death is a part of the life. So there you go. I'd love to hear your comments about the song. I know the challenge might be tribalism and looking down on other groups of people because it's not the same, but the whole concept is the opposite of that. It is recognizing that in one way we're all equal. The way that we're all equal is none of us can know for sure in this life. And ultimately, we make a decision to determine what our view is. Your comments belong right here, which is also where I'll put a link to the song if you haven't heard it yet.